Thank you for getting us started. If we could start with the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, can we start with roll call?
Yes, ma'am, Mayor. Mayor Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz.
Here.
Trustee Check. Here. Trustee Heck.
Here.
Trustee Hunter.
Here.
Trustee Stelter. Here. And Trustee Tarnett.
Here.
Are no.
Thanks.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I will not. Okay. Who would like to approve the agenda? And before we do so, does anybody have any changes to the agenda that like? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All right. And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And so now we're at the portion of our meetings where we open up the floor to anybody in the room or on Zoom who would like to speak for 3 minutes on any topic not on the agenda tonight. And if you're interested, raise your hand or I'll look for a yellow hand on. And I see a hand up. So if you will come up and just give us your name and if you live in town or out of town, and then if you'll fill in the form there, which has asked for your address. We just aren't asking for your address in public.
Okay, hi, I'm Pia Scharfenberg. I live out of town. I'm in Hotchkiss. I have lived here the last 2 summers. I farm and I am so grateful for this community in town. I love it so much, and Town Park has been like one of my favorite places to visit and just hang out with friends or picking in the park or other activities there. And I wanted to give a gift to the town of an outdoor instrument. And there's this company called Freno Harmony that does all sorts of outdoor instruments. And I found them in Ridgeway. They have one at the Dennis Weaver Memorial Park that's like a big xylophone, and it's just magical to play outside. And so I bought Cascade bells, and I would love to donate them to the town. And I've talked to Stefan, and he was saying that maybe the park across the way would be a good spot to put them. So I wanted to come and talk with you all and see if you would like this gift, and if you would like this gift, where a good place for the gift would be.
Thank you. And because it's not on the agenda, I think I'd like to ask Stefan, do we need the trustees to approve it? Would you like it to be discussed on another agenda?
I would.
Okay.
The reason for this is Pia's getting ready to go out of town. So I wanted to make sure it got in front of you before anything else happened. I know that there was some concern about it. One of the original locations being presented at Town Park, and being a good fit. And so that's, Nikki's kind of giving me the side eye. So I wanted to make sure it got in front of you before she had to go out of town.
So we'll put it on an agenda with more information and have a discussion?
Yeah, and that's what I pulled up while she was talking, so.
Oh,
it's up
okay.
on the screen.
Yeah,
All right.
and I have a video of like what it sounds like, but this is what it looks like. And my friends and I are happy to install it. It's just like a quick process of laying a concrete slab to put it. And it's I got the version that is permanent, so it's not portable. It would be stuck into the ground, and it doesn't need maintenance. It just can be used summer or winter.
Well, I'm going to defer to our 2 staff, Stefan and Nikki, to put it on an agenda. And if you can include the video to hear it as part of the agenda, I don't know if you can do that, but if we could have all this information for all of us to see, and then the public can have the whole picture.
We'll do that. We'll also have a staff at our department head meeting to go over any concerns.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I don't know exactly how to do this, but I think it would be helpful to maybe do some specific targeted outreach to the business owners in town to make sure they're aware of what we're talking about, and if they have any thoughts about it.
Right.
Good.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we need to think about the whole thing. What's it sound like? Do people want it?
Yeah.
We have people that can live right next door to Polis Park. There are people that stay there. So I think there's quite a few things we need to think about in terms of the location.
Yeah, and if not there, I'm open to anywhere that your town wants it. I love like the river park, but I understand that's like floodplain, all that more natural. Town park, great, beautiful place. I feel like there's a lot of spots in there that could like it's a great thing to play in public, but I've loved it as something to play in like on my own. So it's a nice thing to have like some space or a place that is not frequented a lot, but also it's beautiful. So if it needs to be heard or is heard, it's okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
you passed over announcements.
Oh, I sure did. I'll go back. Thank you. Anybody else in the room or on Zoom that would like to speak on something not on the agenda? Hey, seeing none, I'm going back. So our announcement, I don't have anything to add other than what's in the printed agenda, and we are still looking for a person to fill the open position on the zoning board of adjustments. And let's see, you do not have to be an in-town resident to serve on this board. Applications are due to the town clerk by November 5th. And please note that the first regular meeting in November has been rescheduled to be held Monday, November 10th at 6:30. Town offices will be closed Tuesday, November 11th in observance of Veterans Day. And if anybody is interested in applying for the zoning board of adjustments, please contact town hall and speak to the town clerk. She can give you more information. Thank you. And thank you for reminding me. I skipped over that really big paragraph on the agenda. Thanks. So next item of business is the consent agenda. And we have three things: October 14th, regular meeting minutes, license renewal for Ed Food Yo LLC, DBA Nidos, and the October 28th, 2025 disbursements. Are there any questions or comments by the trustees on anything on the disbursements? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the disbursements?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Or the, I'm leaving. Okay. Good job. Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to staff reports, and Administrator Wynn, you are up first.
I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. This is the second meeting that you've seen a departmental scorecard. It's because we've updated it now on that normal schedule. So that first meeting in November, you won't see it on there. You'll see instead monthly budget actions. But this has been updated. It was updated as of the 24th. I think Public Works and PD were the last ones to do their updates. Other than that, I mean, you can see all the stuff we're tracking, all the stuff that's struck out will not be on the next one. So next month, we'll just delete those. We are like in process for a whole bunch of stuff, from personnel manual updates to reimbursement requests for our hydro study that's now complete. And I mean, we're just rocking and rolling. Our ADA transition plan is almost done. The survey is active, so if that's out there, if you haven't taken the survey, and there's also targeted surveys to people that are wheelchair bound or might have experienced something where their mobility is behind, or I don't know what the right word is, but so those surveys are out. We want to get that targeted population to see what they think of our streets and public rights of way as well. Other than that, I actually went through and that meter audit that you see that gets updated every couple of months. Today we had a meter that got switched out here on Grand Avenue, one that hasn't been working for like 16 months, something like that. It's now been switched out. It's now a radio read. That's just stuff that we're also working on with all of our major capital projects. Okay, positional cap. So this is part of the budget. I'm going to clean this up. Because this isn't, I realized after I did the full-time equivalents that this may be kind of confusing because I did head count for like department cover sheets, but then a full-time equivalent. So I'm going to clean it up and just do FTEs. And what I mean by full-time equivalents, or why you see like decimals, is because it's based on fixed allocations for each employee. So like my salary, a portion of it comes from general fund, water, sewer, trash. And that's kind of where those FTEs come in. It looks like I have a lot of people in my department, and then I realized I counted you as elected officials, and you're not full-time equivalents. You actually don't even get to go into an FTE count. So this will be cleaned up. But this is what you'll start seeing in the final budget. You'll see all these cover sheets like you did last year. And this will show like the positional cap changes. For PD, we're looking at adding one more full-time employee that's that community services officer that's 70% PD, 30% my department for code enforcement, but also a post-certified officer. Building department, this is going to remain the same. They're all contracted employees. We have active contracts. Public Works, this one I have to clean up as well. Because it makes it look like we have 30-some employees, and that's nowhere near what we're looking at. It's based on head count. Like Parks and Rec, you'll see that there's now something for seasonal non-exempt. I explained that we're gonna, cut it from 3 to 2 from that proposed draft budget. Public Works and our water and wastewater is remaining the same. We are fully staffed now. So that position, there was a third utility position that had been open all year. We filled that, and we're still in that probationary period, but they are fully staffed moving into 2026. And this one shouldn't have been included. That was from last year's budget. Sorry. And then this is where it got confusing because I did full-time equivalents, where you can see kind of what our FTEs are expected to be.
So ideally, it would add up to 100.
No, it would add up to like 20.
Oh, no, I meant
5 and some change.
I guess I was meeting each of the positions. So accounting and payroll specialists, 0.25, so
Right.
that each.
One of those would be, yeah. The difference would be for like our seasonal employees, the part-time employees, those are at a fraction. That was it for me. Any questions on that?
On.
Hello again. Okay, so I just have some questions on the departmental scorecard code. For the code rewrite, I was just surprised to see that we're going from 38,000 as a budget to 75,000. Has that been discussed already?
Not yet.
Okay.
So we have received an amendment to that contract for us to start reviewing. It's not ready for you guys yet. I just wanted to keep track of it in this departmental scorecard so you can see where I'm at. But we have the mayor and I have some behind the scenes work to do.
Okay. The second question I have is about the with the municipal comprehensive emergency management plan. Will we see the projects that we're going to be funding that are related to that in the 2026 budget?
Yeah, so there aren't projects for the MCEMP. And if I might have a description wrong in there, what's in there is like a continuing of operations plan. So what happens if an emergency happens and I'm not available? Who is next in my role? Or it would be for like finance, if something were to happen, an emergency gets activated and we have like a FEMA incident, who is next to make sure that financial stuff keeps moving on. And what I meant by that last sentence, 2026 projects to accomplish. That would be like in my individual development plan. And they've sent out, I probably should add that to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there projects that we need to fund that are priority from that plan?
There would, so this from the county's plan, there would be, we've talked about emergency generators in all of our critical facilities. We go after a FEMA grant again for those. Or the state grants for them. But those would be the kind of projects that come from that county plan that we would need to start thinking.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is about the lead service line inventory. How come Public Works had to start almost all over again? It seemed like they were on a roll and then it just stopped.
So when we got most of the surveys back, people were telling us what their service line was coming into their house. We didn't realize that they have to look 3 feet off their meter pit. Which, how would anybody know what a 3 feet off their meter pit line is? So that's why we had to start over. A little bit more update on that as well. Now the state does not have funding to do that potholing, so guess who gets to do it now? Yeah. We will start that. So
We've got a back trailer.
I know, but we got a back trailer, so we can actually do it.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Questions? No. I have one, and Stefan, could you describe the duties of the person you would like to add for admin? The full-time position?
It's a front desk position, so that position is only answering phones, only taking payments. And then doing some administrative work for myself and Sam, kind of scheduling things in that front office. That's that position we're looking for. That would free up the existing position to focus primarily on, utility billing and permit coordinating. Because that tends to be like a full-time position if you're not interrupted by the front desk. So.
Thanks. Yes, good.
Related to that, I am in town and I get so many compliments on Morgan. So if it could be someone like Morgan who has that personality, that front desk demeanor, she gets a lot. I've had a number of people say how professional and lovely she is to speak.
Excellent.
Anyone else? We'll move on to Public Works then.
So this one is kind of a combination report since I didn't do it last time for September and October. So this report is up to speed as of Wednesday last week. So we'll start off with water. The temporary tank, we are currently running 100% off the temporary tank right now. As you can see, I can jump down as well. The 2 million gallon tank, just the picture right there. They have all the outside stripped as of right now, and they've already cut a hole in it. So that one is completely empty, 100% on the temporary tank. So far, it's doing great. So, yeah. What's the volume of the temporary tank? The full volume was like over 8,000 gallons, but we can only fill it. Like 7. Yeah, sorry.
We're meeting the entire demand.
Yes.
Since when? I'm just like when people are irrigating or watering their lawns and stuff like that, is that all?
We went completely to the temporary tank last week. Oh, so we've been running on for a little over a week. Right now we keep it, I think it kicks on. We put more water in it when it hits about 6.5 feet or 6.6. I forget what Jordan has it set at. It's only 12 a tank. And then it kicks off at about 8 feet, roughly about there. So we're able to keep there, and it is shutting down, usually overnight. So we're doing pretty good so far. We don't have any more water leaks, but you can scroll back up. I don't know who's running it. So that's the update with the temporary tank. The realignment project as well. We had a meeting on the 30th with all the homeowners that are affected by this realignment project on Lambert Mason Drive. It went really well. They have a lot of easement questions. We had thrown out some easements that really need some work as well. So those were all rescinded and we're working on those. They brought forth lots of things that we had missed, like irrigation lines that we didn't know about. what happens to landscaping, things of that sort. So all of that has been pushed to the engineers and they're working through it to see if they can make any adjustments. We also met with some homeowners to see if we could adjust the boring more so into the county road rather than in their right of way. So we're working on that a little bit as well. But that's kind of where we're at with the realignment project. We're at the 90% drawings unless we change them on the homeowner's requests. So, but so far it's been going really well. But for the 2 million gallon tank update, like I said, they've cut the hole in it. They're working on the inside. They've scraped off. You can kind of see it in this photo, that food grade wax and the roof, the supports, things of that sort. This was the most updated one I had last week. So we'll have some more of my next report, but they're cruising right along on that one. So far, so good. Back to those water leaks. We had a water leak last month. Or actually it was this month on Omega Road, and that just kind of shows it. This is a line that's going to be replaced as well. So, and this is what it's doing. It's pinholing, and that'll leak for a week before we know it, kind of thing. And by the time he uncovered all of it, there were 2, and that's why there's 2 clamps on it. We're also working on the parts for those redundancies that we need to have in stock. These were relatively new. We have a bunch that we've rehabbed that sometimes don't work. So we're working on that as well. So we used 2, now we need to go back to kind of thing. But these clamps are what fixes this thing. That's extremely helpful. Scroll down. Wastewater, I don't have any updates for wastewater besides all as well. So streets, we were able to redo the curb in front of the White Bank. If anybody has seen that, they've done a really good job at that, getting the slope in there for the ramp. Now all it needs is paint, but we're kind of outside our painting season right now. But that was a big job for them. That was a really long pour as well, and they did really great. So we got that one. And just not right.
This is our public works team learning how to do concrete work. Because there's a lot of anxiety from them about doing concrete work. And I think they did pretty good with this.
This is their 3rd one, and it keeps getting better every time, so. With that up 4th Street, they've also repainted all of the crosswalks. We got this in right before it got really cold and we had to shut down painting for the season. It's really hard to get a picture of it, but you can actually see them. So we've got all the ones to the schools on 4th Street painted. And another update just below that, the flagger training, we now have 3 certified flaggers. Bailey finished hers today. Rodney and Matt Taylor all are certified flaggers. So they're moving along with that. Dennis will be the last one. With parks, what's going on with parks? We found out that the handicap stall in the women's bathroom at Town Park, someone had flushed a vape and it got stuck in the guts and we couldn't get it out. We also have a chronic toilet paper flusher that will put the entire roll in there and then try to flush it. So we're trying to keep that at a minimum. However, we do have cameras in the park now. So that will help a little bit. They're not in the bathroom. Don't worry, we make sure that we disclose that. There are no cameras in the bathroom.
Vicky, on that I meant to share this with you guys during my remarks. So this is a live feed of cameras right now. And you can see where they've all been installed. The 2 at the top or the 3 at the top, this is all town hall. So we have one that's pointed at the desk. But then we also have at the park, you can see where we've got cameras now at the park. And then the bottom ones are our wastewater treatment plant and our water treatment plant. We still have 2 more cameras to be installed. One for this back parking lot and then one out at public, at the shop.
And maybe one more at the park that does catch the bathroom. At least the front door to it. I will have to say vandalism, kind of off topic there, vandalism did go down in that gazebo where we have the 4-way camera. The art really helps. So I think that has really been a good thing. Probably will read that every year with Mountain Harvest Fest or the high school or things of that sort. It's really helped out, and the lights. We now have lights on timers that will come on when it gets dark, and that keeps people out of there. So that, yeah, there's that. We've done some stump grinding. There have been some trees removed in the park. And we've been able to take those below ground surface and fill them back in, so they're not tripping hazards. So they've been working on that quite a bit.
Those trees are on a list from the tree board to be removed.
They were on the list for
Yeah.
those are the ones that were approved. They were removed a long time ago.
That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
So not just cut down trees,
Yeah.
we're using the tree board.
Yeah, no, these were those really hollow ones, that were blowing apart every windstorm kind of thing. And then some that they were probably cut down before I was here, but they were, up about this high and they're tripping hazards, so we were able to get those down. The ditch is officially off. Stock water only is running through Stuart Mesa Ditch. So we have blown out all the sprinkler systems in the parks. Apple Valley was down a long time ago. And then Town Park was just every once in a while because it takes a lot of water to run those pumps. So that it's officially off now. They're just running on stock water, and we'll have an update on that later on in the meeting. We also finished up Lee's Trailer Park. That was the last of the playground chips. If you remember back in the summer, we did Town Park and Apple Valley. With Lee's, we had to wait a little bit because we actually had to cut an edge into the grass. And you can see that merry-go-round is still standing. Thank God nothing happened to that merry-go-round. But if you scroll down, there's the finished picture. So there's a before, during, and after. I think it looks really crisp. They did a really good job of putting the edging in there. And it's all done. So trash, I don't believe I have, yard waste update. We are meeting tomorrow with a company that will take yard waste to try to get a program going. We've got some high hopes there. I don't want to jump the gun on some things, but we're hopefully not going to have to drive to Austin several times a week. So that's huge for us. That will save money, mileage, wear and tear on vehicles, all of that kind of stuff. We're still working on details though of what that actually looks like, but we're moving forward with that. Got some ideas going. Some others, you probably noticed the fence in the back here, that is complete. It's sharp. They did a really good job on that. I didn't have a picture of it without cars parked in front of it, but if you want to take a look at that. Town hall plumbing, we're gonna have to get a plumber here. We've got some issues with both bathrooms. The sink in both the kitchen and the little kitchenette area here. So that will be the next project for this building for Public Works, or at least to get a plumber going on it. And then the Stewart Ditch update, you'll hear a little bit more later on in the meeting. But like I said, it is off and we are working towards getting it actually repaired. It's just kind of patched right now. But I will save that for the next part of my presentation. So that's all I got for my monthly report.
Thank you. Questions for Nikki? Yeah, thank you. So we'll move on to actions and presentations. And the first one is our two members of Right Water Engineers giving us the report we are really looking forward to hearing.
Want me to present stuff?
Yeah, if you could, before I get started, before they get started, there was a memorandum put in here about the redactions that were done to the hydrogeological study meant for public consumption. You guys do have something that's confidential. Please don't share it. But the reason it was redacted, following guidelines for security and keeping our raw water sources secured. Those specific locations of our spring boxes are not for the public. That's why they've been redacted. You don't need lat launch, for things like that. But they did a great job, sorry.
I did want to ask a question, Steph. We have a slide with those locations on it. There's not lat lawn on there, but I just didn't know if this was, should we skip over those slides or just wanted some guidance on that?
How much of this is going to be in the public domain of this slideshow?
Well, this is recorded.
Yeah, I say skip over it then.
Okay.
Okay. Just so you know, the figures are, that we do have in the slide deck are, simply kind of big picture photos that show the location, but not necessarily any kind of, UTM coordinates or lat long coordinates. So it would take some sleuthing to take, it from an image down to actually locating those features in the field. Thank you for the guidance on that. Good evening. We are really pleased to present our findings. Thank you for inviting us. This is our printed copy of the hydrogeological investigation of the town tailing its water supply, comprised of, as you all know, a series of springs. This is my colleague, Claire Bavers, and she will be co-presenting with me today. As I think everyone knows, so just wanted to, in a big picture, we're going to keep the presentation of this pretty short so that we can really answer questions, turn it over to you guys, see what you're interested in learning more about, and handle more from a Q&A standpoint beyond the initial presentation. So I hope that format works for everyone. So I think, as everyone knows, the primary objective was to better understand how we might be able to meet the problem of the seasonality of the spring flows, right? We have high spring flows in the runoff season, and then those flows drop off, whereas the water demand of the spring flows are meeting does not have that seasonality. And so there's a time when there's an abundance of water, more than can be currently captured with the infrastructure. To meet, if you look at an annual water demand versus an annual water production from the springs probably produce more than adequate water, but there's not the ability to capture that water, deliver it, store it, when the water demand is needed. So the seasonality of the springs as your primary supply for the in-house water is a major issue, right? That was one of the things that we looked at in terms of how to address. And so that was kind of the overall impetus for the investigation of what we were trying to focus on with our study. I think with that being said, I'll turn it over to Claire to get us started.
And I think I just wanted to confirm, I think maybe not the next slide, that's kind of the overview. For the next two are gonna come on, so maybe we'll skip over it, I'll just speak on verbally.
Sure.
Yeah, those ones, but yeah.
Thank you. Forward back. Yes.
So today, as Jonathan introduced, we'll be talking about the work that we've done to gain a better understanding on kind of the hydrogeology or the water flowing into these springs collection systems the town has enough. So we'll be talking about a little bit of background in terms of the geology out there. I'll keep it high level, we won't get in the weeds too much, and then as well as a couple of different types of springs that we have out there, and then just establish that baseline before we dive into the new work that we've done. And then we will touch on kind of some of the field work that went into helping inform this project. And Jonathan will dive into describing some of the hydrology and the spring collection system a bit more. And then we actually are going to talk about water rights after that. And then I will wrap up with some of the results of the geophysical survey that was conducted this summer. And then we will end with some conclusions and some areas of future study that we see before we open it up to questions. So, yeah.
Stop sharing.
Okay.
So even at that level, we can't show
Can you
those.
go back real quick? I think this part is no longer being recorded. I think for this room, it's okay.
Okay.
Just don't share it yet.
Okay.
So I guess I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but the town has a smattering of spring
springs and spring collection boxes and vaults scattered kind of throughout the mountainsides of Mount Lamborn and then some on Land's End Peak as well, which are all kind of showcased here. And we did, for this study, focus on this kind of area outlined in the black box for this study, just to focus on the springs that are currently actively supplying water to the upper treatment plant. So that will be the area that we're kind of talking about today and focusing on. And that includes the Lake Fork Springs, the German Creek, Reynolds Creek, and Old Original Springs in that area. So, okay. I'm gonna just briefly describe the geology that's kind of going on up on those mountainsides. We've got really three important pieces that are out there, and that is kind of this greenish yellow layer that's labeled the Mako Shale. That is kind of the oldest unit out there, and it makes up a lot of the bedrock that we see out on the mountainside. And that rock is largely impermeable, meaning it does not transmit water very easily. And then we've got the next oldest was this pink unit, which is kind of an igneous or crystalline rock that intruded into the Mako Shale unit. This rock, on its own is also largely impermeable and also, does not transmit water easily through it in its natural state, unaltered state. But when that rock came up, it did cause maybe some dipping of the Mako Shale unit, or shifting of it. That might have also led to some localized fractures and things like that within the bedrock within that unit. So, and then last but not least, we have kind of these mass wasting deposits, which are kind of that yellow, and then this blue speckled unit, which you'll see makes up a lot of the area on that map. And those are kind of these younger, more superficial deposits that are largely composed of landslides and some rock glaciers. And these units are importantly, they're unconsolidated, which means that they do transmit water more easily than these other two units that we've discussed. So this kind of bedrock intrusion and surface material has led to a couple different types of spring systems that pop up on this mountainside, and we'll just kind of briefly go over what those look like to prepare us for some of the discussion later on with the new work that we've done. No, it's so fine.
I apologize for not getting this to you sooner, and I'll let you kind of review it.
Thank you. So we kind of have identified three major types of springs that are located in this area. We've got first fracture controlled springs, which as I discussed earlier, there might have been some fractures that were introduced during either the intrusion of that crystalline mountaintop that we have out there that is Land's End Peak and Mount Lamborn. And those fractures, although the rock that they're in does not transmit water, those fractures will transmit water and can provide a path. So fracture controlled spring is where water is kind of following along those fracture paths and is forced to the surface by contact from another or its own impermeable surface. We've also got contact springs, which if you can see in this picture, we've got kind of those brown units are the high permeability, high K. Those are those ones there. And then that gray is kind of more of our impermeable, non-transmissive units that might be that bedrock that we talked about. And contact springs are where the water is flowing through those unconsolidated materials, and then daylights at an intersection with those the impermeable layers, as we see kind of happening in that little graphic. And then last but not least is gravity springs, which are just where you might have a low spot in the topography or depression in the land surface that intersects with the water table. So you have water coming to the surface at that location. Okay, thank you. These springs, as Jonathan kind of previously mentioned, we understand that they are largely fed from snowmelt on the adjacent mountainsides. And this graph just kind of illustrates that a bit further. The axis on the left side of the graph is related to that blue line, which is surface flow in Minnesota Creek. And then that green line is associated with the right axis, and that line represents some average historical values of the town's groundwater spring supply. And as you can see, they do largely match up. We've got that increase in flow during the runoff months that slowly fades away as that runoff goes away. And you can also see that that green spring supply line is slightly delayed, and that is largely due to the fact that it's not falling on the surface, it's working its way through this material underground. So it takes a little bit longer for it to, yeah.
Claire, is that, the green line, is that, measured coming into the treatment plant or?
Yes, yeah. Good question. And I think it's a little bit historical. I think that data is from a couple decades ago, but still good illustration. We'll get into our newer data later. Okay, so with that background, I'm now gonna jump into a little bit of the field work that we've done in the last couple of years just to help inform this study and just show some pictures and kind of talk through what we've done. So our first site visit was out in May 2024, and we had some staff go out there with your town staff and some folks at Respect to just kind of generally observe the water collection system and get an understanding for what things looked like out here. While we were out there, we collected a bunch of high resolution GPS points at those spring boxes and at some other water infrastructure locations. And we also had our geophysicist out there who did a couple of preliminary geophysical survey called a very low frequency or VLF survey to kind of get some preliminary information on the subsurface out there to help inform where we would later conduct our two-dimensional our more comprehensive two-dimensional resistivity survey, which we'll talk about later. We also went out there in July, late July, and beginning of August of 2024, and we did at that time install, again, along with town staff and folks at Respect, installed some drop tubes and some pressure transducers at the spring, a couple of spring collection locations, including those in our study area. And those pressure transducers essentially are collecting pressure data that can be converted into water depth and used to estimate flows at those spring locations. We also.
And Jordan was a trooper. He was sending us data from these data loggers through the end of September. And we were processing the data as soon as we could, because we had this pending deadline with the report due. So it was a really team effort between the town staff, as Claire said, and then Respect provided all of the geometry of these spring boxes where the pressure transducers were installed, which enabled us to translate that data into flow, which I'll get into more later. But it was a real effort. Jordan was out there, in late September sending us some more data. We're like, can we get some more data and see what it shows in this later season? So really appreciate Public Works help on that.
Thank you. We also, on that visit, flew an aerial drone survey just to collect some high resolution imagery out there at the spring locations. And this imagery really just provided, some unique perspectives of what these spring fed drainages look like and what the vegetative cover looks like at these locations. So there's a couple shots of that on the left. It also, or an example of some of those key locations is an example of this splitter box, this closed splitter box downstream of the German Creek Springs, which Jonathan will touch on a little bit later. But again, just provide some really unique perspective that you don't get from some of the publicly available aerial imagery and that you don't see from the ground. So that was really valuable. And then this past summer, we had some staff go out there to conduct our geophysical survey, two-dimensional resistivity survey. So it allowed us to kind of see at depth along a line on the ground to kind of get a better understanding for what the subsurface looks like out there and where we might have some additional water out there. And I just want to highlight that this survey was really cool because it allowed us to kind of circumvent. I know that a lot of this out there is on National Forest or US Forest Service land, which, you know, and is heavily vegetated, as you've seen from some of those images. So doing other exploration methods such as you know, monitoring wells, things like that become more difficult with some of those considerations in mind. So this allowed us to kind of navigate around that and still get a lot of information about what the subsurface looks like out there.
Again, this was a really coordinated effort with the town and respect in order to, because as she said, this is really on Forest Service land, and the combination of the Water Smart grant being a USBR funded, whereas this is CWC, phase one is CWCB state funded, phase two is federally funded and triggers NEPA requirements. And so, as you guys all know, there's the reason we didn't do the work last year, and because we had to get the NEPA clearance, and then the town engaged with the brush cutter to clear out these paths in order to enable these linear features that enabled this work to go. So we may be presenting results, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is really a cooperative effort.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we did complete 6 of these kind of survey lines out there as a part of this field work. So with that, I will pass it off to John.
Can I go back? Oh, yeah. Stop showing on that one, please.
If you like, we can take down the video tomorrow and edit it.
That would be great.
Back on that. So,
Can you answer, there were 3 that were planned but didn't get done. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, one of them was so we did 2 at the German Creek Springs, and that third one was gonna be more upstream, and the planned transect for that one, I think it had some brush. The brush was still quite thick, I think, in certain areas, and there was also a lake, a small pond, not lake. Lake is extreme, but a pond up there that prevented them, as you can see, they needed to nail these stakes in the ground to complete this survey, so they weren't able to complete that third location at German Creek. And then I think somewhat similarly at Reynolds and Old Original, they were also second transects at each of those locations. But they had some issues again there was still some thick brush. I think that was hard to navigate, and I know that they did for I think Reynolds, they did feel like they had collected enough data and that the second transect wouldn't have provided much additional information at that location. So I think it was a combination of a couple things. That's the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, the standing water was one of the things that prevented us, and then the other ones, they weren't quite linear and they didn't quite get cleared enough. This equipment is quite heavy, and if it's not really cleared down to the ground, it's hard to drag it across if you still have, you know, stubs from the vegetation.
And I think that the straight line is also pretty important in collecting some high quality data. So if it veered off one way a little too much, I think it also made it difficult for them to run those lines. So.
And that brush goes back pretty much. There was a pretty good gap between clearing and the actual project, so.
Am I okay with?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay. So this, I apologize that it's a little bit on the small side, but so in doing the hydrologic modeling, which sounds very sophisticated, but in essence, it was a water balance, right? So you kind of look at your overall, your precip, right, as your source water, and then you look at your losses. You know, you look at your vegetative uptake, you know, with evapotranspiration, or ET as we call it. You've got some deep percolation, although with the underlying bedrock being the Mancos Shale, unless it's fractured, you're not going to have much going through the Mancos Shale. It's highly impermeable unit. And then you've got how much of that stays on the surface with these unconsolidated deposits. Not much, right? You don't see a lot of stream channels up there. You see a lot of unconsolidated material, whether it be talus slopes or just landslides, where that moisture primarily some of it's gonna be rainfall, but a lot of it's gonna be snow melt, right? That's gonna percolate into that ground until it hits something impermeable, and then it's gonna follow that out. And that's really what we see out there, is we see these springs emerging. And as Claire detailed, there's a few different types of springs. And the amount of attenuation, when you looked at that graph of a typical surface water hydrograph on Minnesota Creek versus what we see at the treatment plant originating from these springs. So that delay from the peak on a surface water, we refer to that as attenuation. Sometimes attenuation can go as it's going through a detention pond and it's just slowing down, and the peak is reduced and it's widened, right? But the ground can also serve to attenuate those peak flows. And so that's what those hydrographs show us, and how much the individual springs, as I'll show you shortly, have different attenuation factors, right? Some of them, like when we look at Lake Fork, for example, it pretty much looks like a stream hydrograph, because the material over there, a couple factors. One, it's like boulders and talus material that easily percolates and transmits that water without much retention or attenuation of those flows. And then it's also got relatively impermeable subsurface right near the surface though. So it basically goes in and it comes right back out, right? And so when you see a system like that, you're getting the supply when it's available. And if you don't have a way to capture it and deliver it and store it when your demand is there, then you kind of have to look elsewhere. And so whereas one of the other springs that I'll show you is much more a flatter hydrograph. So you're seeing much more greater attenuation in those flows. And we think that that's more with the fracture controlled system, where the snowmelt infiltrates into the ground, gets into these fracture systems, and it takes longer for it to work its way through. And so by the time it emerges on the surface, you'll see it's almost a flat hydrograph. So those are ideal for your situation, right? You're taking advantage of the natural storage provided by the subsurface. So one of the things I wanted to point out here with laser is, so these are the spring locations and the spring boxes that were field identified. And these are the tributary basins to each of these. So over here, we've got Lake Fork, here we've got the German Creek Springs, here we've got the old original and the Reynolds Springs. And these are based upon surface topography, the delineations of the tributary basins. One of the things that we made an effort to do, but were somewhat stymied by, was to try to create subsurface drainage basins, which is much more relevant to actually how much drainage area contributes to individual springs. The problem is that the way, and she's the geologist, so she can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you oftentimes will look at where bedrock is outcropping, and that will determine like your depth, your angle, and your location. So if we had outcrops, for example, we've got this white space here that's not showing it's contributing to any spring. Well, likely this narrow drainage basin that's feeding the German Creek Springs is in fact probably getting some drainage from over here to those springs, because that's where there's no springs coming out over here, but there are here. So that means one of two things: either the water's staying in the ground and emerging further down slope, or it's going laterally and contributing to some of the other springs. So what if the bedrock was exposed, then we would be able to delineate those basins by looking at where the bedrock dip is occurring, and we can project when that water goes into the ground, it's going to hit that impermeable layer. Right now, we kind of are blind because, as you guys know, almost this whole area is covered with these unconsolidated deposits. And so it obscures our vision of what's happening in the subsurface, which limits our ability to further refine these drainage basins. So some of the things I was alluding to. So this is the red here is the Lake Fork Spring. And as I said, you can see how it looks just like that Minnesota Creek hydrograph, right? Very peaked, big runoff, and then it drops off precipitously into a base flow in the winter. The other ones, which on this scale, and you can see this scale, this is all from the pressure transducers that were installed and the data that was collected by Jordan and then processed by Whitewater. So you can see that the flows peak at like 6 CFS. That's just like a surface stream, right? I mean, it's got a pretty good sized tributary area, and we're basically just capturing water that if the unconsolidated material wasn't in the stream channel, we'd be looking at a stream. And that's essentially what you're dealing with here. On the German, the upper and lower, there's it's much flatter, less peaked, but you're still seeing a high seasonality from 1 CFS in the runoff time to just a fraction of that during the winter time and the late season. This is kind of a look at what the data actually looks like when we're downloading this and processing it. There's a lot of noise to the data. Part of that is we have to make adjustments for barometric pressure. So there's all kinds of adjustments that had taking the raw data that Jordan provided and processing that. But this is an interesting graph. And one of the things I wanted to show you real quick was when you look at Lake Fork Spring, you can see that a peak flow is all the way up here at 6. And even down here, you're at 1 CFS in the dead of winter. But when we look at the next, we see that this is at the 80-20 splitter box. So what you need to understand is we often refer to this as the German Creek splitter box, but it also contains the Lake Fork water. However, it's the Lake Fork water after the pipeline takes off to Rover Reservoir. And so last time when I presented in January, you may recall that I talked about that Lake Fork water rights looked really promising, but you only get 1/8 of the water rights. And that's actually further reduced by consumptive use analysis that was converted of the water rights. So when you look at the 4 CFS, it quickly goes down to a 1/2 CFS in terms of what the town actually gets. And then it gets further reduced by the consumptive use credits when it's operating under that changed water right. So what we're seeing is that this is, again, a combination of the German Creek Springs and the Lake Fork water. And you can see how low the flows are by the time they get down to the 80-20 splitter. And that's, again, this combination that all the water that's being measured is not the town's water, it's being split up. There's also probably some transit losses, right, in the conveyance pipelines, which fortunately is part of the phase 2 scope of work. Ingenious by the town to include that in the scope and to respect, I believe they assisted with that stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Anyhow, so I think that's really important. One of the other interesting things is that the 80-20 split at the splitter box, that originates again from a water rights perspective. That's the consumptive use. So you guys have a junior water right for 4 CFS for the German Creek Springs, but you also have a plan for augmentation, and that takes a senior water right downstream, and it takes you dry that field up and I think it's permanently dried now. And originally it was contemplated that it could be you could cease irrigation if a call occurred. Now it's just permanently dried up. So those consumptive use credits were basically assigned and allow this for the German Creek Spring Collection System to continue to operate when there's a call on the system. What's important though is that when you're irrigating, there's a consumptive use factor and there's an irrigation return flow factor. So when this decree went through, 20% of the water was deemed to be irrigation return flow. So that was water that could not be taken by the town and consumed. It had to be bypassed down. So when you look at that 80-20 splitter, that's the consumptive use portion that you're allowed to take. And the 20% is the non-consumptive portion that you have to deliver downstream and make available to other water users. One last point on this is that when you get to the splitter box, the 80-20 split is based upon the German Creek water rights. However, it also includes the Lake Fork water. So you start by taking 1/8 of what you're entitled to in the 12.5% from Lake Fork, and then it gets further reduced, probably not by necessity, but by practicality, right? You've got an 80-20 splitter, you're collecting the water in one pipeline where the Lake Fork delivers it to be combined with the German Creek, and it goes into the splitter. So then you're losing an additional 20% of your Lake Fork water and delivering that downstream. So the water rights are really complex and it's very important. And one of the things that I think is in phase 2 scope of work is to really understand and document the water rights. I know that the water rights are not always been strictly administered. We highly recommend that the board proceed on a basis that they will be strictly administered in the future. I think that you're just setting yourself up for failure if you don't plan on that, because the water supply is less and less and the demand is greater. And so those calls are going to be occurring more frequently every year. And so you need to be set up. You guys, I think right now, has it been discussed at all with the board about the measurement rules that are being promulgated? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, our water attorney's been working with us on it, and we actually did a protest so that we could participate.
Awesome, great to hear.
Could you define administered?
Yes, absolutely. So when there is insufficient physical supply to meet demand, that is basically what's referred to as an over-appropriated stream system. And then when a senior water right is not getting their entitlement, they place a call on the stream. And that call historically was an actual picking up the phone and calling the division engineer or the water commissioner and saying, I'm not getting my water. Can you please administer the stream system? So the administration of a stream system is basically starting with any unadjudicated water gets shut off first. And then they take the most junior water rights and they shut them off. And they proceed down the list until that senior water right that placed the call is satisfied.
Thank you.
Of course. So I alluded to this earlier. You can see with the old original spring, we have very little seasonal variability in the flows. That's great because that helps you guys meet your demand. We are postulating that this old original spring, the reason that it doesn't have the same seasonality is because it is a fracture controlled drainage. And that just results in more residence time in the ground and attenuates those flows more. This again kind of shows the same pattern. So the water balance, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure as it shows up, I wasn't supposed to shout. We need to redact something else here. So I wanted to take a step back real quick and talk about the water balance itself. So we talked about those watersheds that we showed earlier. So what do we do with those watersheds? Well, we have precipitation, rainfall and snowfall. And there's publicly available information. We don't have precipitation stations within these drainage basins, right? So we have a tool called PRISM, and it's an acronym. I don't know what it stands for, but it's a publicly available system. And what it does is it interpolates in between known climate stations. And so you can pick a grid anywhere and it will take the best available data and extrapolate that. So that's what we did here in the absence of better information. So is that saying that that's exactly right down to, you know, the tenth of an inch? Probably not, but all of the drainage basins, what we're really kind of focused on is what is the relative yield of these basins? And what are we seeing out of these basins? And which ones do we think might be generating more physical supply than what we're actually seeing in the spring collection systems? And so to some degree, when we're talking about whether the evapotranspiration for the vegetation is exactly right, or the precipitation is exactly right, because all of the different watersheds are being treated with the same mass balance, if you will, it's more of a relative, which ones, you know, have a bigger drainage basin. But one of the interesting things is one of the best springs, Old Original, has a tiny drainage basin. So that just tells us that there's a lot more going on in the subsurface. And so I hate to kind of acknowledge this, but there's a little bit of diminishing returns in terms of how far we would recommend going with the hydrologic modeling. Because unless you can actually define the drainage basin with a high degree of accuracy, you're going to be limited, right? We can talk about even relative differences between the basins, and some of the parameters might be the same. And so we can focus on the parameters that aren't the same. But one of those overriding factors is, well, how big of an area is the precipitation falling on that's tributary to this spring? And when we're looking at Old Original, that's producing 9/10 of a CFS almost year round, it's got a good water supply that's not being reflected by the surface topography. You know, and the question is, well, how much effort do you go to try to better define the subsurface drainage basin? Or are your efforts better focused on what are the observations that we've got that indicate, from the pressure transducer data, what is the kind of best bang for the buck? And at this point, I would say that we're going to get limited return on the investment if we were to put all of our efforts into really trying to get this water balance nailed down. I think there's more fruitful alternatives that can be explored to really get wet water in the treatment plant, and then ultimately to the town population that it serves. So what I just want to quickly show on this is that, again, when you're talking about the Reynolds Creek, you're seeing the hatching. You'll see very less variability here than you do with the German Creek system. And this German Creek, these are the pipelines. So the German Creek actually includes the Lake Fork water, and the Reynolds Creek also includes Old Original. So let's see. So sorry, I sometimes forget which order my slides are, and I just get talking. I get excited. So one of the things that we do think is of value, though, is as we were working on phase one, we're always keeping an eye on how are we setting up a framework that can be built upon in phase two. Hopefully we're doing that for you guys, but if somebody else is doing it, we want to set up a good foundation that can be built upon. And so we were ecstatic when we saw that the town was already going out for bid on improving the hydrologic monitoring. So I think Respect, this drawing is from Respect, and they have, I think, five new monitoring locations where they're going to be putting in. One of them is at the treatment plant. I think two of them are at the 80-20 splitter. One of them is over on Lake Creek, And then one of them is also at the confluence of where the old original and the Reynolds Creek Springs merge, the two pipelines. And so that's really going to enable better data collection, right? Right now, I think quite frankly, between Jordan and Greg Weatherby on our end, have done a Herculean effort to try to get this data collected, synthesized, interpreted, and processed to the point where we can actually come up with these graphs that show meaningful results. But I think that we have the opportunity to take that to the next level of not only accuracy but precision in terms of this proposed data collection. Yes.
Are these plans, is plan monitoring, is that more of the same kind of monitoring you're doing right now, or is it a different approach to data collection?
You know, I don't know if James, if you're on still, I'm only hesitant to speak on it because we were not directly involved in this. I do know that they are planning on, so when you're dealing with, sorry, go ahead.
I believe that is part of our water CIP phase 1. And that's that third piece that we're doing is raw water metering. So these are those new locations.
So it's not the transducers, it's actual water metering.
One of them,
That's all.
yeah, one of them is so remote that we're looking at like Starlink connections, so we can get that information.
Okay, that's solid.
But it will be essentially the same technology in terms of the best way to measure. So most of what they're going to have is, rather than kind of trying to figure out, so a lot of these are dealing with flow over like a weir, right? So you have an equation that you can apply if you have the depth of flow over the weir. So that depth of flow is probably going to still be measured using like a pressure transducer because it's the most efficient means. It may be delivered so that you can have remote sensing. But I think what they're also going to be doing is providing a more controlled. So the 80-20 splitter, for example, has a pretty good weir as part of the splitter box. So we have a pretty high degree of confidence that the flows measured there are pretty good. Some of the other ones, not to diverge into the weeds too much, but a lot of times what we're dealing with is the head going into an outlet pipe. So trying not to go into the weeds here, and I'm failing. But if that pipe has free flowing conditions, then it's what's called inlet control. And your calculations that you're going to do based upon your head going into that pipe are going to be very accurate. However, we know that there are systems where, like on the Reynolds Creek pipeline, you've got a backwater effect. So you're measuring, that's not inlet control, that's outlet control. And so when you're measuring your head and you're using those same formulas, you're not actually getting an accurate reading because the flow is going to be much less because you don't have free flowing downstream conditions, you have a backwater effect. And so that's going to build up a head and give you an artificial calculation unless you, yes, artificially high. Yes, exactly. So we originally, I think, I still have it. Sorry, I'm completely off script. Claire is not surprised, but I apologize. I should just keep clicking and let that guide. Do want to talk. I think most of you were probably here in the January presentation that I did, where I talked about this. As Claire indicated, what we really focused on is we've got the upper plant right here. We added this one line here from this original diagram that was prepared in 2000. There's now a pipeline that enables this old original in Reynolds Creek to be delivered to the upper plant. Right now, the springs that deliver water to the lower plant don't have a way to get to the upper plant. But we think that that's something that I think, well, I'll get to that with the next steps. As we've already talked about, right, on the Lake Fork Springs, as we know them, are actually, the water right associated with them is the Beaver Dam Ditch. And so this table was prepared by your previous water council. And I apologize that I didn't, it's referenced in our report, but not on this slide. Sherry Floyd prepared this table. And all we did was add the location. So we took only the springs that were focused on in this report that provide water to that upper plant. Just wanted to quickly point out that, as we've already discussed, 1/8 of the supply up to the first 4 CFS is what the town is entitled to. During the non-irrigation season, that's the only limitation. You have a 0.5 CFS for municipal purpose. But because this water right originated as an irrigation water right and was changed for irrigation purposes, you don't actually get the half CFS. Even if it were flowing at 4 CFS, you would in theory be entitled to a half CFS, being 1/8 of that supply. However, the change case in this 14 CW 3004 actually limited what you could take and were entitled to the consumptive use. And so there was a more rigorous consumptive use analysis. And long story short is that your maximum that you would get during the irrigation season is 0.2 of a CFS. So big difference, right? 4 CFS looks great. You're like, okay, well, maybe it's only a half CFS. Well, it's not even a half CFS. So the point, what is the point? The point is that the legal supply is as important as the physical supply. If you don't have both, you're not going to get water delivered to your customers. We're not doing that. So here we are showing the location of the features that were identified in the field. These include both springs and spring boxes that were identified. This was for the, we have one for the other spring systems as well. But this one was very instructive because the German Creek Consolidated Springs has 4 different points of diversion identified. So when you're dealing with a surface water right, which a spring is, it's in the ground, but when it emerges at the surface, it becomes a surface water right. So traditionally, if your point of collection is within 500 feet of the decreed point of diversion, that's usually considered to be within compliance with the decree. If it's outside of 500 feet, then you need to do a change in water right. Change in water right means you have to quantify your historical consumptive use, and that's all that you get to move. So it's really important to know. So the good news, really good news, is that all of your current spring boxes are within 500 feet. Also, as Claire's about to talk about, these transects, if you look at the full extent of the transects, and we've got some great graphics that she's going to share with you, everything that's on those transects is within 500 feet. So if we see a zone that could potentially be developed, I want you to remember that this figure shows that can be developed within 500 feet. Of course, we want to get the blessing of your water attorney and make sure, because one of the things is if we've already got a spring collection box associated with one of these 4 points of diversion, and our best opportunity for additional capture of additional supply is within that same 500-foot halo, can we develop a second one? So there's some things that we would like to work with the water attorney on in terms of interpretation to make sure that the town doesn't spend a lot of money trying to develop an additional supply to only to find out that, well, you've already used that water, right? You have to use it, you have to go find water elsewhere. This basically showing the same thing at the other locations. This is the old original, and here's the old original. Again, here's the transect. Here's the Reynolds Creek Spring. Again, great news that all these, this was a second spring that was identified in the field, but is not currently part of what is being collected. And then this is the Lake Fork or Beaver Dam Ditch location where we have two transects again within the. But you can see that this is basically along a stream channel, right? And a lot of these are, but this one in particular, it's when she'll share the data, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but there's not much going on in the subsurface here. So it's really just, when you see that hydrograph, it's when you start putting all the different pieces together, it all makes sense, right? Of why this one is so peaked in terms of the runoff hydrograph. There's no attenuation because it doesn't have a chance to go into the subsurface other than those superficial deposits. I think that's it.
Yeah, so I am just gonna, I think Jonathan teed us up nicely for this last portion of the presentation, which is just going through some of those geophysical survey results. Jonathan already highlighted a couple of those transect locations. You can see all 6 of them on this figure here. 1 down at each of the Reynolds Creek and Original Springs, 2 along German Creek Springs, and then 2 also at Lake Fork Spring. I was going to just highlight some results from 2 kind of pretty different looking springs in terms of what they have going on at the subsurface. Those would be Middle German Creek Spring, which we refer to in the report, and on these figures as T1, Transect 1, and then also I'll talk a little bit about Lake Fork Spring, specifically the Transect 6. And yeah, we'll take a look at them, and then we do have the other ones as well, just not in our prepared slide presentation. So those ones are again located at these 2 3 box locations. So what we have here is the top portion is kind of a view to orient us and see what we're looking at. We've got our high resolution imagery and some high resolution topography on that upper piece of the figure to just again place us and see what are we looking at in the subsurface. That does, we had our GIS tech line this up really nicely so that it would be easy to kind of see again and place the bottom portion of this figure, which is the geophysical survey results, to place that directly there in real space. So as far as the bottom part of the figure goes, I'll just explain the legend and what we're looking at a little bit before we dig into some interpretation. We've got that color scale on the right illustrating resistivity, and what this is really, what we can use this to interpret is that those high values of the red is representative of a non-saturated impermeable kind of feature. So if we had a big chunk of unfractured, crystalline rock, that's kind of what that might look like. Whereas when we have that contrast of that very low resistivity, we can interpret that as saturated, or that there might be water there. So that kind of the color scale works to that benefit, where blue in fact does mean we think there's water there. So now that we know that,
does that make sense to everybody in terms of resistivity? Just water is a good conductor, and so when you're doing resistivity analysis, and you have high resistivity, it means there's not much saturation there. If you've got the blue, which indicates low resistivity, that means it's likely a saturated environment.
What's the depth from top to bottom?
Great question.
And
These are unfortunately in meters, and that I'm really glad that you asked that question. And I'll let her answer it.
Yeah, so these, like Jonathan said, are in meters, and I know that those numbers might be a little fuzzy or small, but the depth from kind of, again, that top of that upper right corner is that, I guess 0 must be somewhere in the middle now that I'm looking at this. 0 might be this little dash there. So So we've got about 9 meters up from that point, which is about, give or take, 30 feet.
I can't really see what you're talking about. Can you just say it right in the middle? How deep is the deepest part?
Makes sense. Oh, God, it's something.
So this,
Yeah, so
That's the pointer.
this is basically zero right here,
Okay,
and this is like 30 meters.
Okay.
This is like 100 feet.
yeah, okay.
So, but it's a great question because our ability to get water at 100 feet up on the hillside is very limited, as Claire can talk about. Let her.
So these are all great questions, and if you have any more, please ask. So what we can kind of interpret from this cross section is based on kind of this, again, it's deeper. It's deeper, and we can kind of see that it has a little bit more of a vertical or up and down orientation. So we can interpret this as it might be a potential fracture zone where, again, maybe some water is flowing to this area from a fracture controlled system. But as Jonathan pointed out, even though there might be a lot of water down there, it'd be really difficult to potentially, develop that or try to access that water where it's located. On the other hand, we do have this lovely blue area more on the right side of this figure. And this is indicating, is more indicative of that shallow subsurface flow through the unconsolidated material. Especially, again, we've got this area right here in that sweet spot that looks very close to the surface. So that would be something where if we could get a digger out there to remove some of that very top overburden to see if there really is one, saturation, and then two, if it's flowing, making sure that it is being transmitted. It's not just a pocket of water that's stuck out there for some reason that would be, depleted quickly. So these results, I think we are hopeful that is another, especially at this, again, this transect kind of coincides with the decreed location of German Creek Spring number 2, which is, to our knowledge, I don't think we saw any spring boxes out at that location during the site visits. I don't think that there is a spring box collecting water at that location. So if there is flowing water at the subsurface location, could be a really great opportunity to develop German Creek Springs a little bit more.
And do we have more left in our right if we were to develop that more?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, German Creek is one of your better systems where you've got a total of, I believe, 4 CFS between all the different locations, but if they're not specific, so if you've got, it's not like 1 CFS 4 different locations, it's a cumulative amount between all of the locations. And so you can basically, and you're not getting anywhere close to that right now. And so there's a lot of development potential legally.
And then a less promising location. This is, again, one that Jonathan alluded to right before he handed it back off to me. But at the Lake Fork location, we are seeing, a lot of flow there. And a lot of that flow is kind of coming to the surface quickly and is flowing down the channel there. And we can see that is supported kind of by, we've got a lot of this red along here at the surface, which again indicates those impermeable, can be interpreted as those impermeable boulders, rocks, and other units that don't transmit that water. And we again got a potential fractured zone. We've got a pretty similar scale here. This might say 28 or 25 meters here. So again, quite deep. We've got some potential fractured flow here. But again, it's at a depth where it would be hard to access and then transmit at this location. So this is a location where, again, there's already a large amount of flow being collected. Legally, we don't have a lot of additional water that we can collect and use. And we also don't see a lot of area potential for, physical development of additional supply. I think that one's kind of maxed out. So I just wanted to kind of highlight those two kind of ends of the spectrum. We've got a couple others that, fall somewhere within the middle, but those were kind of an example of those interpretations, and the data that we collected, for this year's survey. So I think with that.
And to Karen, to follow up on your point, as far as the development potential, that's where we're looking at the composite, right? We're looking at what has potential for physical supply development, but also has the legal right to take that water. So it's a great question, and that's really kind of what we're trying to do is pull all these pieces together and say, okay, this is what makes the most sense. And I love that it was a great question also about the depth, right? Because we have to recognize what can you actually do up on this hillside, right? I mean, even if you could get a drill rig up there, there's no power. You're not going to be able to put a pump in a well and pump it out of the ground. So what does it really matter if we had something that looked promising at 100 feet deep up on this hillside, right? So there's where we're kind of, again, putting all the pieces together, and we're like, hey, where do we have shallow supplies that we can go out there as part of phase 2 and let's dig. This has been a very non-intrusive method, other than some weed maintenance, which is probably going to already have grown back. But where do we have the potential for where we seem to have saturated conditions? This is a 2D, right? So it's not 3D. So we don't really know what's going into the page and out of the page, where we've got this. Okay, well, the shallow blue area. So we want to have a water supply that can be developed and delivered via gravity, right? In order to accomplish that, we got to target these shallow areas, right? We know that there's more supply when we're doing these water balance, right? It's like, okay, it may be intellectually interesting to say, well, there's some of our water balance. It's just that it's 100 feet deep, and it's okay, but it's inaccessible, right? For all practical purposes. This is what's exciting, where it's shallow water, where maybe it's not coming to the surface, and so 100 years ago, when they were developing spring boxes, they didn't decide to put one there because it wasn't being pushed to the surface, right? Those contact springs kind of require there to be an impermeable layer that forces that water to the surface. And there are definitely locations where they observe that. That's where they put the existing spring boxes. But we think there may be opportunities here. But we don't say, let's go put a spring box right there. We're like, okay, what's the next step? Let's go do some field investigation and prove up what this data indicates might be there. And so that's where one of our, again, jumping ahead. Claire did a great job of describing the nature of the 3 different springs out there. Contact and gravity are very similar. I mean, they're basically both being driven to the surface, either by gravity or by an impermeable layer, or a combination of the two. And then the fracture controlled are the ones that are really interesting, because those are the ones that you get the in-ground attenuation, right? And so you kind of get nature storage, if you will. And so unfortunately, most of your springs don't appear to be fracture controlled. The old original being the main exception in the ones that we've studied. Hydrologic modeling, again, I don't want to be overly pessimistic on it. I think that the proposed flow monitoring that the town is pursuing, I think, is that gone out for bid, or are you guys getting proposals on that yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Anyhow, I think that that's a great next step in order to get better data collection. And it's really going to feed into 2 things. One, it's going to tell you where you're getting your physical supply, but it's also going to tell you where you've got to supply at certain points, and then where you're getting it at the treatment plant, right? So part of the next phase, right, is to study the infrastructure, the collection system, right? What is the what is the material, the pipe diameters, right? What is the condition of those pipes? Because we know that there's transit losses. What we don't know is it 5% or is it 50%, right? I mean, the one hanging off a tree limb, crossing a gully, probably not a watertight system there. But I think, and then the other part of it is that you have to, once you collect that data on that collection system, you need to understand its hydraulic capacity. And that hydraulic capacity is not just, oh, I've got a pipe that so much diameter on a slope, right? If it's partial flow, then that may be true. But when you've got a system where you've got backwater occurring, like in that Reynolds pipeline, you have to understand that that's part of the hydraulics of the system. At times, you've got water, so much water being delivered from Lake Fork that it backs water up into the Reynolds pipeline. And so any pressure readings that you might be getting as far as water level in the Reynolds Creek pipeline, if you don't understand that hydraulics of that system, then you're not going to understand how much water is being delivered in that pipeline. So I think it's great that was already in the RFQ for phase 2. We highly recommend that be part of the scope of work, because you have to do those 2 points, right? You have to understand what the existing infrastructure is to understand what those transit losses are. Because if you just look at developing additional supplies at the source, right? It's like, what does it matter if you gain an additional 10% in supply if you're losing 30% of it trying to deliver it to your treatment plant, right? So you have to look at everything in combination in order to get that water to the plant, to your customers. As I've already said, I stole my own line. The legal water supply is as important as the physical. I think that, I think there's a great foundation to be built upon in terms of previous work that has been done on behalf of the town by both the attorneys and previous engineers. But I think that there's nuance that's lacking. I think that nuance is really important as we've talked about. It can take what looks like a 4 CFS down to a half CFS down to 2/10 of a CFS. And that 2/10 of a CFS, that's your peak month. In other months, it's even less than that. So it goes down to 0.17 CFS. And then I think even further below that. So I think that it's also really important when we're talking about where to focus the town's efforts is where do you have the legal right to take the water in priority, right? Because you can have as much water as you want, but if you're not legally entitled to it, it doesn't mean a thing, right? And especially when you start looking at a stream that's going to be administered more and more in the future. So the North Fork of the Gunnison, right, goes on call every year, as does Minnesota Creek. But the North Fork is a little more pertinent because, and I have part of what we're envisioning to be phase 2, delving into the water rights is, are any of your springs subject to, we know that you have great spring water rights. Oftentimes they're the #1 priority on an individual drainage. What we don't know is, are they subject to a call on the main stem? So you might be the #1 priority, but if you're at 1895 and there's a call on the main stem of the river at 1890, that call can come up into the tributary and you can still be out of priority. So I think that's where a deep dive into those water rights and really documenting that is going to benefit the town tremendously in terms of where to develop.
Is that?
It's in New York.
It's in the RFQ.
Yes, exactly. It was very well written RFQ. I mean, it really, as we were putting together our report, and Stefan, I really do thank you for changing the order, because originally the response to the RFQ was before finalizing our report.
Yeah, there were so many people asking for it, so I extended the RFQ.
Yes. Yeah, and appreciate that because it makes a lot more sense. And as we were preparing the phase one report and we had already kind of looked at the RFQ, we saw how so many of these things dovetailed into the logical next step for phase two, and kind of building on the work that we did in phase one. And again, just to highlight what Claire talked about at the end is, you know, we really recommend that phase two, it wasn't explicitly in the RFQ, Stefan, but I think it can be interpreted to be an extension of many of the items that were in the RFQ, to where I think that the geophysics really needs to be taken from kind of this theoretical to let's dig some holes and see what's actually happening in the subsurface.
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize. I said I was going to be short, and I get so excited about this stuff. I kind of geek out, and wanted to open that up to questions.
And then I'm gonna open it to the public as well, but I'm gonna let the trustees have first dibs on questions at this stage. Any that haven't been asked already?
Because I'm new here and I don't know the whole context of this maybe may not be relevant, but with the objective of considering where we are with the moratorium on water taps, we need to understand the supply versus the demand. And where does the element of climate change and shifting water site peaks and valleys and stuff like that over time, how does that figure into the decision-making process, or is that too premature to be talking about that?
No, I don't think it's too premature at all. It was something that we were going to. So it's a little bit of a frustration with the hydrologic modeling, because that's really where it comes into play in terms of your. So oftentimes when you're dealing with precipitation records, right, you're dealing with a 20-year average. And so, you might be looking at a future 20-year average that's 90% of your historical 20-year average, right? And that could have significant impacts on the yield of these springs, especially where they're developed. What I mean by that is, so spring boxes tend to basically go down to a certain depth. So they might be 6 feet down, let's just say for argument's sake, and they're capturing that spring flow in the subsurface. That doesn't mean that they're completed down to an elevation or a depth where it's out of contact, right? It may be saturated, but it may also be saturated below that. And so if the flows decrease in that environment, right, your saturated level might be here today. In the future, under climate change, maybe it's here. If your spring box is only here, then you're only capturing a fraction of what you have historically. So you can actually end up with a much smaller percentage, depending on how the individual spring box and the collection is going beyond what is actually the yield of that basin, if that makes sense. So it is an important factor, and one that we really quite honestly saw as more of phase two than phase one. But we do think that that's an important consideration for phase two.
You have any more questions for them? I was giving trustees first shot. Any other questions based on that? Yeah, go ahead.
I only know of one weather station that we have, and it's 14 miles west southwest or west northwest of us. Do we have another option? Do we have a plan to put a weather station up on Mount Lamborn?
Yes. Yeah. I can take that. So I've been working with NOAA to try to get one at our plant, at our treatment plant.
Right.
And we can actually see with this raw water metering for that remote one, because we're gonna have to do like something that's solar powered with a satellite connection. We can see if we can attach it there as well.
Good.
So, but I've been working on the water treatment plant.
But my thought is that the basins, we gotta have something up near the basins. It gives us an actual precipitation amount per year, which would give us a much better picture on what we're gonna get year to year and now. What we have now is this real nebulous idea of how much we're getting. And like, we see a lot of snow on the mountain right now. Down at Hotchkiss, they got virtually nothing. And that may be our difference. And it's hard to predict if we don't have good data.
Yeah, even like, slightly off topic, but related is, the Snowtel stations, right? Most of you are probably familiar with Snowtel. Well, part of the problem is the Snowtel stations are all up like above 9,000 feet. And so a lot of the Snowtel stations look okay. But what they're missing is the fact that the lower basin snowpack is decimated. And we're not seeing it anymore. And that's not captured in the Snowtel data. So your point is excellent, that you need to be collecting data where it matters.
You know, I've only been here 37 years and I've seen the difference in snow level. It's markedly different every year.
Yeah.
And the last 5 years, it's gotten even more lessened on the lower slopes, where I think a lot of our collection is. Source. A water collection, yeah.
Okay. All right. Everybody good? So, audience members, if you want to ask some questions of our consultants. And because we don't have a podium, I'd just say,
I can give the podium back.
okay. Might make it easier for posterity. And Mary, I saw your hand first.
Very Baffert, Pamela, resident. I have a question. It's gonna be in your geek out phase. So you mentioned the barometric pressure affects the readings. How does barometric pressure affect the reading?
Sure. Yeah, so at the different Springbox locations, the way that we were collecting data that we used to interpret flows was just through a pressure transducer. So it's reporting pressure, just pressure in general. What we are getting at from that pressure transducer obviously is the pressure of the water above the transducer, but it's also reporting atmospheric pressure at the same time, because we can't really separate that out just at that one transducer. So when we say that we're collecting barometric pressure, that means that we're also collecting the barometric pressure, atmospheric pressure outside of water, so that we can, if there are any pressure changes to the weather, whatever is going on out here, we can separate that from the pressure that we're recording in the vaults, in the spring boxes, so that we are just isolating that pressure from the water, so that we can turn that into a water level.
You can have the same water level at a location, and a storm comes through and brings a pressure wave through there. And the pressure transducer is going to measure a change in that level if it's uncorrected.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Anyone else in the room that would like to ask a question? Okay. And I don't think there's anybody online, is there, Ruben?
No rain. Okay.
Well, I guess with that, we have your report and we have a lot of things to.
Yeah. Thank you again for the opportunity to present our results. As you can tell, I kind of geeked out over this stuff, and it's really exciting. And we hope we can continue with phase 2. But really enjoyed working with town staff and with respect. You guys have a great team here, and we'd love you to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I just want to make a comment, and yeah, thanks. It is. I mean, how many towns are dealing with such a complicated geological issue, and the staff and the trustees and the public, that we couldn't do it without the help of folks like yourself, and getting grants so that we can hire folks like yourself. So I just want to say, for anybody listening, it's amazing what the little town of Paonia has the most complicated water system in the West. And we are tackling it the best we can and getting good information. Thank you. And I just want to thank all of you and the staff for hanging into this. It's a geologic conundrum.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. So, you know what? Would somebody make a motion for a 5-minute break? All in favor, aye. Okay. Is 5 minutes enough? Yes. Yeah. It's okay. Who seconded? Was it Mike? Mike, did you second?
I second.
I second. Thanks, everyone. And the next order of business is consideration of appointing a planning commission. We had one person, Carrie Soto, put her name in and she has withdrawn. So we're back to having a position open and I think we're gonna do some advertising in publications.
Right, and her reasoning was that there could be more times that she had to recuse herself or not.
Yeah.
And we already have one who may have to recuse herself, so.
Yeah. Anyway, I really appreciated that she put her name in. Yeah, it's great.
Sorry, you're still. Thank you, my trustee Hack, for the candy guy. There are some positions like the tree board that we saw an opening as well. So we can still reach out.
Thank you. And the next order of business is, there are 3 thank you letters here to the folks that made it possible for us to have the planters planted and some of the watering that took place this year and all the watering last year. So it's Christina Patterson, the Garden Club donated $300 that was used for the planters. And then I have to say, it's my husband who designed and planted the planters. He grew some of the plants that are in them and then he got what he wanted to put in from Paonia Farm and Home, and there's some money left over for next year, and he's willing to design and plant again. If you're listening, Shane, I just said it in public, so. So I just thought it'd be really good to have a thank you letter, and if anybody has any changes they'd like to make to a letter. Yeah, it's been through us. So any public input on any of this? Just give people. Okay. Okay. Thank you. We'll get those, and I have those in here to be signed by everybody. So I won't adjourn the meeting till we've all signed that and the disbursements. And go ahead.
I'll move to approve the letters. As written.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. And the sole source culvert for the Stewart Ditch Company.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit up there. Well, I won't read it to you, but in a nutshell, to catch everybody up, the Stewart Ditch collapsed underneath the Pan American crossing up in Apple Valley back in August. The Stewart Ditch Company was able to patch it together to get through the season. Now the season is over, we need to fix it. The pipe has already been purchased and that was also approved by board last meeting. So they have that available, correct? And now we are moving towards who's going to put it in. Stewart Ditch uses Rundle Construction in the majority of their projects. They're very familiar with what the ditch needs, how to bill, all of those things. We can see the sole source questions here. I think the biggest one too is they're the ones that did the patch job. So to catch anybody up with this job would take a considerable amount of time as well as coordinating with Rundle to get their equipment back. They own the beam that's holding up the utilities right now, which is not ideal. It's getting colder. Our water main is exposed right now. And at the bottom of this report, there's a picture of it. Their Pan American or Apple Valley's irrigation is exposed as well as an electrical line, I believe. So without reading all of that to you, we also have a limited amount of time to get this done. The ditch company legally only has a certain amount of time during the year to get this done. We would like to get it done even sooner because of the water line. Going with Rundle, we'll get that done as soon as we can. If there's any other questions.
Yes.
I won't read it to you.
So, we do have an option for sole source. That's what is being presented to you today. There's questions that have to be answered in the affirmative. Nikki did put those answers together. It looks like it does fit it. I was skeptical on price, and let me back up. The bid manual is also included as well as the drawings. I know that makes up like 300 or 400 pages of this packet. I'm sorry, but it's for transparency. So you can see that we did go to our engineers who didn't just say, okay, this pipe's good, good enough. They do say the pipe that was already purchased was good enough, but then also have things for like head walls. That's to make sure that bank doesn't further erode away. It's concrete, talks about pins. All of that is necessary for this project. And that's what Rundle will be building too. I was really skeptical on price until I got the email that I included in this packet. That included his quote. And it is, let's see.
You say the page once you find it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. It is page 440. Where he says it's $72,500, which is haul and install pipe, dig and backfill ditch, place and haul class 6 material road build out. It doesn't include asphalt, concrete, traffic control, seating, surveying, BMP management. We can't do asphalt until the spring, so it's going to be, stone in that spot until we can get it in spring. Traffic control, we've now have 3 flaggers who can do traffic control. The concrete work, we're going to have to find somebody that does that concrete. So that's the head wall as well. That's why in the cover letter, give me a second. I say that the project cost is closer to, so this was a joint effort of Nikki and myself. The reason there's so much writing in here is because I edited it and added more into it.
Because it types too.
I do type too much. I was told that a few people. But there's, so I'm thinking that the expenditure is going to be closer to $175,000 when it's all said and done. Just putting that out there. This is going to require a budget amendment before the end of the year. I have to know what the final cost is to be able to make that budget amendment. And then we're going to have to plan our paving allocation next year from the county for this and something else.
Yeah,
But
there's a plan.
yeah, so, but that cost is, some of that cost is going to carry over to 26.
But this is just for Rundle, sole source Rundle to do.
Questions?
Yes.
The additional 100,000 roughly is basically for the concrete work or?
No, so this is looking at the whole picture. We've already spent a little over $60,000, excuse me, on pipe. There's going to be 72,500 from Rundle, and then there's going to be that cost for concrete.
Question?
No, I was just gonna say an amazing amount of specifications that need to be met with your 40 or 60 pages or whatever that was.
Yeah, and I apologize. I know some of it looks pretty redundant, but this is the same package that we put together for Doris Avenue. Same stuff that'll go out. It's a pretty standard document that protects the town and gives expectations for our.
If there's no more questions with the trustees, I'll ask if anyone in the public would like to make a comment. Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? Let's see, and you have to go back to page 159 to see the proposed motion.
I'll move to approve Rundle Construction as sole source contractor for the Pan American Stewart Ditch Crossing Repair Project as justified in the attached sole source questionnaire, and authorize town administrator to execute all necessary agreements consistent with the town's construction standards and bid manual.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All you, Dan? Oh, but
I was gonna have a question about, should that include a maximum amount that can be negotiated by administration?
yeah,
We know what the quote is.
Okay.
So we know what the cost will be. What we don't know is the cost of concrete. Once we collect a bid for that, it'll come back here. So.
So we're good with the motion as is. Okay, and it was seconded, so all in favor? Aye, great, thank you. Last item, RFQ for the IT managed services decision.
This is what the bulk of people online are waiting for. It looks like we do have some representatives from the firm that we're proposing as our top scorer. I'm really happy with how, well, number one, the response, how many people responded to this RFQ. We had 10, which is 10 qualified proposals, which is the most I've seen in my tenure here. And going back through minutes for the last 15 years is the most I've ever seen for the town of Paonia. So thank you for everyone that provided proposals. The problem was that there were so many proposals that it took a long time for staff to get through. That being said, out of all 10, we had 2 that were really close. But and I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's Istonish was the number 1 bidder or the highest scoring proposal, followed by Silicon Plains. So we're recommending as staff that you move forward with Istonish. I will say that the people that we had scoring kind of mattered. And so one, we had Ruben, who was like our front office tech guru, who scored this proposal. We also had Derek from our utilities, who also is pretty tech savvy and knows what was needed for SCADA systems at our treatment plants. Then we had 2 police officers. Right now, our current IT provider can't work on police things because they're not certified in CJIS. This firm has a lot of experience working with CJIS, and all of their techs and all of their help desks are also certified in CJIS. So that was really important to the police officers. But we had Sergeant Henderson and our SRO, Kate Heiniger, who both of them are, Garrett is a self-described nerd, and Caden builds computers at home. So having those 4 also got me to step out of it, so I didn't have to score. It was wonderful. But we're moving forward with this kind of process with our RFQs, where there's also this predetermined score sheet, so that not only the people providing proposals know what's going to be scored, but also gives a standard document that all of our scores are using for that score. That being said, all of that information is included in this packet, including all of the score sheets, all of the proposals. That's another reason for the 400 pages of proposals. We had 10. So.
Questions from the trustees? None? Okay, any questions?
I just had a comment. It was just seeing the whole review process and the comments, the transparency of it. There was a lot to go through, and I appreciate that, like the thoroughness that staff had in going through those.
And
yeah, it was really, it made it easy for me when I was reviewing it to say, yeah, that makes sense. I understand why we're going with them.
Thank you. So this is us taking this RFQ process and trying to improve it every time we go out for a new RFQ or RFP.
Anyone in the audience that would like to come up and make a comment? See none. Okay, or someone ready to make a motion?
I move that the Board of Trustees authorize the town administrator to negotiate and execute a 3-year managed IT services agreement with Astonish effective December 1st, 2025, with the option for 2 additional 1-year renewals based on performance. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, another unanimous vote. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to adjourn the meeting until we have, hang on. Would someone like to speak? We see some new faces up there on Zoom.
Hey there, I'm Clinton with Istonish. I'm a client partner here. Our team, put up, I would say, a pretty good effort putting this response together, and we're excited to get to work and all the fun stuff that's about to come our way with the onboarding and all of that. And really taking care of your town.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in here. My name is Annette Quintana, and I'm the CEO and owner of the company. And I just wanted to say we really appreciate the confidence that you're putting in our team. And we look forward to a really great partnership and working together. And I now want to just quickly kick it over to Andy Russell because he's going to be more of the on the ground individual that lives in your area. So I want to give a shout out, Andy.
Hi, everybody. As Annette said, I'm Andy Russell, and I've been working with Astonish for about 12 years in the different government contract programs, and I live fairly close by in the town of Parachute, and I look forward to working with you all and getting to know you all, and hopefully getting to visit Paonia on a business instead of pleasure trip. So it's very good to see you all and glad to be here and glad you gave us the opportunity to serve you.
Thank you. We're very excited to have you on board. Thank you very much. Anyone else with anything? Did we miss
The short-term rentals committee?
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I can, I'll give an update. So I've been out and I'm not ready to do that yet.
Okay. More time on that and yeah, all good. So with that, how are we doing? And signing, okay. And we're just for people who might be watching, because we have at the end of our meeting, the trustees have to sign our disbursements. And then in this case, we have some thank you letters that the trustees are signing. We've made it a policy to not adjourn the meeting because it's still public business being done. And it's important that we just, when we're all still sitting here together, that it's done in public.
I think I only signed one thing in there.
Okay, we'll hand it back. Did you miss the letters?
Yeah.
The thank you letters?
At least in one of them.
All right. We'll make sure nobody leaves the room till you sign. Yeah, I have a couple sweet tarts here if anybody needs one.
And I will say that with the short-term rental ad hoc committee, we've all said we're waiting. And including our two resident folks, we really feel like having Mayor Pro Tem Schwartz leading us was excellent.
Yes.
So good facilitator. We've all said we're just gonna wait.
Right, and you extended the
The
whatever.
moratorium's going until April or May.
So
we're good. Right.
We just have a few.
Actually, yeah, I didn't sign up.
Yeah, and I'll sign up. I'll adjourn here and and then if you sign, you're free to leave.
Okay.